So now we come to the individualist perspectives in sociology, which is a breakaway from the classical theorists as well as the Frankfurt School of Critical Theory, and also structural functionalism and symbolic interactionism. There will be some overlap, but this is really an extension of the symbolic interactionist theories and going deeper into even more individualistic or even more phenomenological or mind-oriented perspectives. Now, the individualist perspectives in sociology is comprised of around three main themes here, which are social interactionism, symbolic interactionism, and ethnomethodology. And these are generally micro-sociological perspectives as opposed to macro-sociological, which we saw in the classical sociologists' work. Let's start with the first theme, social interactionism. So this is generally looking beyond action and structure. So we're neither looking at social facts or social structure or social order, but we're looking into how individuals actually create their identities and define the situations or reality that they are in. So if you recall, in week 1, we talk about theories of socialization, and we talk about the work of George Herbert Mead, who talk about the play stage, the game stage, the I and me, and the looking glass self. So this is very much going into the individual's way of understanding phenomenon that exist around them, and it could be a very unique or individualistic way of defining reality. So that's why these perspectives are called individualist perspectives, and they are defined as a breakaway from the macro-sociological perspectives that attempt to explain individuals' behavior through looking at social facts or social structure as though they were atoms or molecules. In individualist perspectives, the assumption is that human beings are very unique and they can overcome these social facts or social structures around them. So in this theme, social interactionism, the social process works in the following way. Interaction is a reciprocal and continuous negotiation over how situations are defined. And a definition of the situation is a joint construction of the participants in interaction. So when you and I interact with each other, we are really both contributing our own definitions of the reality that's happening around us. For example, you are telling me about a problem that you're facing, and I feel sympathy for you because I have managed to understand your definition of what the problem is. So it is an interplay of action and reaction, an interplay in which each social actor interprets and responds to all others. Consensus exists only when this definition has been established and agreed by all involved. So for example, it could be any situation. It could be that you stumble upon a bag of money in the middle of a road, and you could think that it's a good thing, and you're telling me the story as though it's a tale of good fortune. Or it could be a sad thing where you feel sympathy for the person who may have lost that bag of money. And whatever you decide to describe as the truth of your narrative will be what I get from my conversation with you. So your definition of reality becomes my definition of reality when I understand, accept, and acknowledge. However, if I do not accept your definition of the situation, I might be arguing with you as to whether it is really a happy story or a sad story. So moving on to the next theme, we have here symbolic interactionism. So Herbert Blumer, who was a student of George Herbert Mead, created this term symbolic interactionism. He defines the term as a down-to-earth approach to the scientific study of human group life and human conduct. Its empirical world is the natural world of such group life and conduct. It lodges its problems in this natural world, conducts its studies in it, and derives its interpretations from such naturalistic studies. Deriving from Mead's ideas, Bloomer theorized that human beings act towards things on the basis of the meanings these things have for them. For example, we often pass around pieces of paper with value on it, and we exchange them for goods. Why is this piece of paper so important to us? Because it's money, and its function is to store value, and we've used it to trade. So these meanings are a product of social interaction throughout time and negotiation in human society. Money has been around for centuries or millennia. So it's established in a way as a social fact. And individually, we are capable of responding to these things. So these meanings are modified and handled through our own interpretive process called thought. You can see how this derives from Weber and interpretivism. One other example of a theory that falls under symbolic interactionism is Howard Becker's labeling theory. A Chicago school sociologist, Becker studied labeling and deviance. For example, how do kids in school get labeled as lazy or hardworking, smart or not so smart? So Becker was concerned with how labels can create behavior in what he terms the self-fulfilling prophecy. For example, going back to the example of schools, if kids were to be labeled as smart, they are more likely to perform well in their exams and later on in life. If they're always being labeled by their teachers as lazy, hopeless, and so on and so forth, it's going to have an effect on them emotionally and mentally, and they really become what their teachers have labeled them. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So obviously there's a very strong mental process that goes behind interpreting meanings behind action. So we come to the term phenomenology, which is the study of consciousness, which is how we make sense of our lives. And this concept was founded by Edmund Husserl, who attempted to connect knowledge and everyday experience. To us, the outside world only has meaning because we are conscious of it. We are conscious of what happens around us, therefore we are able to use our minds to interpret and give meaning to it. So Husserl criticized the positivists for believing in the external nature, the social facts, general laws of human societies. And Husserl also did not quite agree with Weber's theory of social action, in which Weber looked at traditional action, affective action, and the other two types of social action, which he considered quite fixed. So Husserl said it was incomplete, as Weber did not explain, in a deeper sense, how individuals themselves understood the meanings of social action. For example, if one were to shake hands, one needs to also explain the process in which an individual understands what the meaning of shaking hands is. Why is shaking hands considered to be a friendly gesture? And why isn't it a hostile gesture? So phenomenology attempts to uncover the way meanings are attached to social action in the first place. So for phenomenologists, how the individual perceives social reality becomes the unit of analysis. So the unit of analysis here is not the individual and not the social structure, but the way in which the individual's mind works. So researchers in this tradition often use the methods of in-depth interviews or ethnography to study people's common sense, the way we make sense of things around us, or taken for granted assumptions. Like, how do we get common sense in the first place? So the process of becoming and the process of typification, how we categorize things around us, was the main focus of phenomenology. How do you, for example, through experience, categorize what situations are safe or dangerous to you? Now, the reason why we have the word or the term ethnomethodology is again because of the root words, in which it comes from two words, ethne and methodology. Ethne means people, while methodology is the study of methods. Hence, it is also known as the study of people's methods, because it studies the ways people try to determine whether something is real or not, and how people judge social situations. So in other words, ethnomethodology is the study of how people construct their common sense. It takes the philosophical backbone of the phenomenologists, where their ontology is that society is socially constructed, and the sociologists should try to find out how people construct this world. So it's very much like when you watch a supernatural movie and you're wondering whether you believe in the supernatural or not. And some characters will believe in it, and some characters always don't, and then they have a very interesting ending at the end of those movies. The main theorists under ethnomethodology are Garfinkel and Sikurel. Now, phenomenology is more like the ontology behind it, while ethnomethodology is the method. So, this was initiated by a mathematician, Edmund Husserl. And the core of phenomenological method consists in the discipline's use of the reflective techniques of bracketing and reduction. So it's like, what's the parameter of your definition of reality? And how much can you reduce your scope to what is the reality that you will accept? To disclose the essential features of intentional objects. So what objects are perceivable or what's in your imagination? Meanwhile, ethnomethodology is a partial offshoot of phenomenological sociology with deep roots in classical social theory and also sociolinguistics. It is our descriptive study of the reporting and accounting practices by which individuals, or what we call socially embedded actors, people who are among social relationships with other people, how they and those other people reciprocally come to attribute meaning and rationality to their own and others' behavior. It is like when something happens and you try to justify to yourself what you did and what the other person did and how it led to this outcome. So here we get back to George Herbert Mead again, who theorized that individuals give meaning to the world by defining and interpreting it in certain ways. So to all of us, the world is never experienced directly or exactly the same by everyone. But we always have our own filters. We always experience the world through the ideas that we already have, preconceived notions. So the meaning of reality is the meaning that we choose to give to it. So like the famous phrase, when men define situations as real, they are real in their consequences. For example, we have an occupation called bus drivers, or today we have Grab drivers, because we have buses, or we have cars that you can call for hire. So one's identity can be pegged to one's occupation. If there is no such thing as a bus, then there is no such identity as a bus driver. So symbols like this are used by us every day in social construction. They are then learned and communicated by interacting with others through language. So that is why it is called symbolic interactionism. And Mead was particularly concerned with people's ability to use and manipulate symbols. So that's why he tried to understand, in socialization, as we covered in week 1, the process of interaction between the self, the I, and the me. And what gestures are considered significant gestures? It is when an individual responds and acknowledges a gesture, like shaking hands. And he was also interested in looking at the origin of the mind, which arises through communication, which is the result of the interplay of significant gestures in the form of significant symbols. One of the most important symbols would be language. So our minds are characterized by meaning, knowing, significance, and reflection. And it's through this that we develop the concept of the self, which arises in the process of gesture conversation with ourselves and others. It is reflexive. It means it's a two-way or multilateral process, and it's constantly created